I've struggled with mental illness for the better part of a decade. Seems that after 3 combat tours, my mind was broken. I was trapped in a bleak world. Blindly, I fought as many of those demons as I could, but I was failing. It left me with a broken marriage, wedged between my daughters and I. The family was terrified of me. I stand before you now, changed. How did I flip that switch? Let me show you. I am Duane Topping, fashion designer, artistic director, and principal designer for Topping Designs. Each one of those garments was sketched and constructed by me. They represent my journey to find myself and contain that mental illness. They've just been brought to life by those remarkable people. Each one of them has challenged judgment and overcome adversity to become something bigger. Retired from the Army 2012, fell into a downward spiral. The trauma I experienced left me with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I let that label of mental illness consume me. Spent a lot of days in dive bars, a lot of nights passed out in parks. I didn't sleep, was angry, and that anger was boiling into rage. When some of us experience traumas, there's a switch we flip. And it turns everything into anger. It protects us from the surreal world around us. As a civilian, I couldn't turn that switch off. My mind was still patrolling Haifa Street, still on high alert in the Al-Mansour district of Baghdad. And I tried all the methods of recovery, psychologists, medications, group therapies. And they all came packaged in a one-size-fits-all box. They didn't work. I needed to change, think outside the box, and find myself again. Now, we've all heard the cliche, be true to yourself. But when you're struggling with some of these demons, abuse, assault, addiction, your true self is the last person you want to be. Trapped inside your own mind, labeled by the outside world, and plagued by anger and fear, without control. And they tell you to beat these demons, you gotta face them head on. But in the last place, you wanna hang out inside your mind. This is certainly true for me. Things were so bad inside my head, exaggerated by the outside labels, that it became clear the only way that I was going to flip that switch off was to re-examine my own unconscious biases, which meant I had to find the courage to see myself as more than this ugly book. But that courage eluded me because I believed those labels assigned to me. What you saw reflected in those garments was that battle between who I thought I should be and who I really am. With fashion, I challenged the labels of PTSD and tattooed biker and faced my demons with a new set of tools. For those of you who've experienced trauma, think about how that's defined you. I was an artist before the ravages of mental illness consumed me. When I was younger, I was a painter, cartoonist, sculptor. While deployed, I wasn't looking for Sports Illustrated in those care packages. I wanted Vogue, Marie Claire, because as I grew older, I developed that love of wearable art, fashion. And I knew in order to move forward and leave that mental illness behind, I had to find that artistic voice again. So one day, early 2016, I came home and I told my wife, I'm going to teach myself to sew. She looked up at me and laughed, much like she's doing right now. And she said, when? Well, I held up my brand new machine and I said, right now. And it worked. Seems I had a soft, squishy side. I couldn't see it behind the PTSD, but through sewing, I found it. And it was so much about doing something different. It was a long ways from those dark corners the hardness of my experience had spawned. I was finally able to forget my labels, PTSD, and face my demons. Now, I should tell you, sometimes I'm still mistaken for the doorman at my fashion events. At my first event, I was given a couple of dollars by a woman while I was standing outside. It seems my outfit wasn't fashionable enough. Truth is, this is the best it gets. Constantly, I'm bombarded by whispered labeling. But this is the obstacle we all face. And the test that we subject ourselves to is, do I belong? As Shakespeare said in his play, As You Like, all the world is a stage, and all the men and women merely players. The parameters that we use to find our roles are often dictated by those internal dialogues, our traumas, and of course, how much we believe the labels bestowed upon us. I have a mental illness, and this has served as my script for over a decade. But we are all labeled, either by how we look, where we've come from, where we've been, our experiences. But often, it's a combination. And when I came into the auditorium, maybe you saw a biker, and maybe, along with that, came all the connotations and ingrained biases in all of us. Outlaw, dissident, man of nefarious intent, maybe. But Shakespeare went on to say, people have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his life plays many roles. Yes, I am a biker. In French, je suis un motard. I've been in a war, and I've spent a great deal of time on the other side of the tracks. However, I'm so much more. I've made my exits from those stereotypes through sewing. My clothes are that story. Each collection represents a step towards my center. In early spring 2016, I attended Metropolitan State University of Denver. In my English class, there was a young student, and she was intelligent and dynamic. Sadly, she didn't see it. And she, like me, felt bound by assumption. She was labeled as an awkward, pink-haired woman, and this was the label that she felt she had to play. In me was only anger. That was my role, and I gave the world the wrath. So I created a line of clothes that would show my character and maybe inspire this young student to see that inner beauty that she possessed. They would symbolize her character and that soft femininity inside of me. Each line purposely accentuated, merging light fabrics with strong lines. Well, I think I captured everything about that young student, Silvana. And I also expressed some of those repressed passions that had been mauled by post-traumatic stress disorder. And the next line for the fall was inspired by the 1920s, that period in American history where we began to experiment and open our minds to new identities. My current line attempts to embody the individuality of people who identify as queer, intersex, transgender, outside of the bell curve. Like many of us, they've judged themselves in the light of stereotypes. And through my clothes, I found a soft strength to see a wider view of myself. No longer am I imprisoned by a normative view of my character. I've transformed my perspective, and this alone has been the catalyst for me to turn that switch and break out of the box. Fashion has allowed me to forget the judgment I had for myself and move past my labels of PTSD. I still have PTSD, but I put it on a shelf. It's always going to be there. I found peace in the creative process. And if nothing else, it's taught me you don't have to dwell on labels and forget your true self. I am a vet with post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm also an artist, a fashion designer. I no longer have to be that angry soldier. Chanel said, fashion is not in the dress alone. Fashion is in the sky. When you walk out there, it's in the street. Fashion is about ideas, the way we live, and what's happening. And this is how I see the world, different from those common labels. This overwhelms me every time. So trauma, whether in Baghdad or in your home, causes some of us to flip a switch. It turns everything into anger, fear, protects us. But when that danger passes, some of us can't turn the switch off. Finding a way to reconnect with your identity before the trauma, looking past your labels, turns that light on, leaves the darkness behind. So I encourage every one of you, find your switch, turn that light on. Thank you.